Hello, my name is Harriet, and the most important thing you need to know about me is that 2 months before graduation, I binge listened to Desert Island Discs. Now, for those who don't know the format, go check it out. It's a national treasure of a show. But for those who do, you might be wondering why I found such a relaxing format so addictive. As I've mentioned, it was 2 months before graduation, and I had spent the past 3 years becoming more and more uncertain about what I wanted to do with my life. Looking back, I guess I partly used it for inspiration. It is an interview show that talks to a variety of fascinating individuals about their lives, but the main reason was a little bit unreasonable. I mainly used these episodes to hear about the guest's experience in their 20s, which would usually take up to 2 minutes of the interview. But when some novelist or journalist or professional gardener implied that they had no idea what they were doing in their 20s, that would run in my mind for weeks. I know it's a weird coping mechanism, I know that, but the problem's not so unique. We now live in a world where our generation and the generations after us have overwhelming access to information in our formative years. On one hand, we have social media, which most of us use to promote the best version of ourselves, and on the other, our news sites document society's most extreme failures daily. Perfection and disaster are always at our fingertips, yet normality, not so much. This particularly affects the 20-somethings, as we are angry that we didn't start pursuing our career at age 12. We're in fear of increasing global conflicts and natural disasters, and all we really want to know is 1, how to stop crying in the bathtub, and 2, how to put on a fitted sheet without struggling. The 20s today are different from 20s past, that we can't ignore that. But at its essence, the struggles with loneliness, rejection, identity, and having no idea what you're going to do with your time are still a rite of passage. And so, we decided to compile a collection of interviews from more established adults, talking to them about their 20s, not necessarily for their advice, but most certainly for their experience. Hopefully, we will prove that there are infinite ways to live through this decade. In other words, it should be a reminder to you that you are doing nothing wrong. Our first guest is perfect for those who are still finding their way. Her name is Armelle de Laubier Rhally, and after a series of odd jobs and a stint working in finance as a broker, she eventually landed an internship in her late 20s for the art and luxury auction house Christie's. This would ultimately be the first stepping stone towards a rewarding 20-year career, as she would become the global manager for the Old Masters department. If you are someone looking for the courage to go after what you really want, this is the episode for you. So without further ado, I am Harriet MacDonald, and this is You at 22. Hi, Armelle.
Hi, Harriet.
Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Well, it's quite an eventful one, given this is the first episode, so it should all be pretty exciting.
Yes, I'm very excited. First time for me, absolutely, to be interviewed.
Well, we've already spoken a bit about the questions, but we've gone through some of your answers to them, and there was one we liked particularly. And so, in 3 to 5 words, who were you at 22?
Well, I think I did a little bit of, soul searching, but I would describe myself as probably terribly immature in 2 simple words.
What does immaturity mean to you? When you say terribly immature, what are you thinking about?
I think it would be linked to a certain naivety, you know. I was, you know, probably coming from a quite protected world, and I didn't know much about the outside, and I was quite naive about the future. I was, you know, happy bunny, and I had many friends and this and that, but yeah, I don't think I was ready to be a grown-up yet, in that sense, yeah. And I didn't really know myself. I didn't really have any idea of what the grown-up world was all about.
What was the moment when you thought reality hit, that you realised the world isn't this, as you say, happy bunny place? When did that first start?
Well, I think it was gradual, but you know, I had to make a living, and I wanted to be independent. So yeah, it came to reality because I had to, if I wanted to rent a place, live with friends or with myself, you know, I had to get a job and take decisions. And that was, you know, really, I mean, is it all so serious now? And I was not too sure how to go about it. So it took me a while, yeah. After I studied, I traveled, and it didn't came so quickly, to be honest. It was a bit of a journey.
Well, since it was a journey, we should probably start at the beginning and talk about university and graduating university first. So you went to the European Business School.
Yeah.
Where you studied economics.
Yes.
When you were coming to your final year or graduating, did you have any idea of what you wanted to do?
Not really, because what happened is that I originally wanted to do history of art. I was quite into art, but it was very much that at the time it was all about the economic situation, economic crisis. You know, it was all about that. And my parents, like many parents, wanted me to study something that would give me a job. Art history was not really, you know, in their idea, would never give me a job. So it was more, you know, a decision that I took because I had to do something. So I enjoyed it. It was fun. But I mean, coming out, to answer your question more precisely, out of the European Business School, I was not much more decided onto what I was going to do next, because it was not really my first choice.
So when you did eventually graduate, because nowadays especially there's always that internship and graduate scheme race, and you feel secure if you've got a job immediately lined up, you know, at university. Was that the same for you in any way, or did you not have a job?
No. It was very, very different back then. I mean, I decided to take a gap year. I was a bit tired, I suppose, after all this sort of studying / partying. So I went to South America. I went to Mexico for a year. I worked in a mission on a sort of program for women and stuff. It was quite full on and interesting. And I traveled around. And then when I came back, I didn't do any internship, anything like that. It was only sort of years later that I did an internship where I went into the art world. But then I was back in Paris, and I had to sustain myself. So through friends, I found a job in the financial services.
Were there any odd jobs in between that?
Oh God, yeah. No, I worked, and through my studies, I did work. You know, I did everything. The sort of waitressing, I don't know, putting things in envelopes or whatever, marketing, you know, silly jobs that you do as a student. Yeah.
So then you did end up getting a career job as a broker.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on that?
I sort of stumbled into this kind of job. Because I was still not quite sure where I was going. I thought, okay, well, I sort of saw it from the outside as something quite glamorous. It was the 80s, you know. So I thought, well, this is exciting. I think I needed excitement because I didn't have a passion declared for anything. So I thought, okay, that's a job for me. It's fun, and it's going to be a lot of money, and it's going to be glam, you know. And I wanted to try it. and I got a job somehow and learned on the job. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Brokerage is pretty straightforward. Just have to be a little bit switched on. It's have much more than that.
It still looks quite fancy as a job.
Exactly. I think that's you're absolutely right. This is probably what I saw. It's the sort of the fancy thing and the going out. I think things have changed, but at the time you would go out with clients all the time.
That was a bit of a headache.
Oh my God. Well, it was a lot of partying, and it was fun, when you are so young to, have the ability to invite your clients to clubs and pay for champagne and all sorts of things and restaurants and things. So yeah, it was fun. My life was fun.
So I wanted to just touch quickly on when you were talking about passion. You said you didn't have a passion. Do you think that's something that's important?
I think it is important, passion, but passion is I would say for me, what's more important is probably the meaning of things. Passion is good. You need some, but it sort of it's not really sustainable in the long run, in my view. Something profound or meaningful is sort of what I feel passionate about, rather than sort of passion itself, if that makes sense.
So when, because you ended up changing from broker to intern at Christie's.
Yeah.
Was passion anything that came to play in that?
Yes, I suppose a little bit more. So what happened is that I lost my job as broker because, so I started in Paris, then I moved to London. And it was at the time of the euro. So the euro came and all those currencies like the French francs, the Dutch mark, and all those things gone, sort of disappeared from one day to another. And I was working on the French francs, sort of short-term, mid-term treasury bonds. So a whole bunch of us from, in a few days, sort of our job disappeared. It was planned, obviously, but I mean, we were maybe a bit naive. So I had a guaranteed contract. And in those days, they still do that. So I was guaranteed for another couple of years. And they said, do you want to check and go? And I said, give me the check, I'm going. And 12 hours later, I was gone. And then I was like back to, what am I doing now? But then I sort of realized that even in the art world, which I always thought I couldn't be part of because I didn't do the art studies, there is, as soon as you've got a commercial side of things, you need, on top of the specialists of art, you need the business people. So that was my sort of angle. And so I decided to go and study at Christie's Education. And then I got an internship very easily following that. And that was my sort of foot on the art world.
Were you terrified during that moment when you sort of lost your job and didn't know what you were doing? Or was it?
No, I wouldn't say I was terrified. No, I was, I think there was some excitement, because in a way, as much as I had a good time as a broker, I knew fundamentally I couldn't sort of do that forever. It was sort of, it's fun, but after a while you get a little tired. Even my health was sort of taking its toll because of so much sort of partying and going, not enough sleep. And so it was welcome. Of course, you're a little bit worried. You think, oh my God, what am I going to do? But I think I was excited. I had a bit of money they gave me, so that was good, a cushion. And a relief, I suppose, to do something that I felt closer to what was really myself, if you want.
I'm interested as well in when you decided to do economics, your parents were an influence in that. Was there any part of you what did that feel like, knowing that you were listening to yourself rather than to your family at that time?
Well, that's an interesting question. Yes, it felt good. I mean, I was already in London, so already independent from my parents. But I'm lucky because my parents have always trusted me. So yeah, it was my decision. I guess I felt that I was growing up and more responsible.
Is it liberating in a way?
Yes. I mean, they didn't force me. I can't really accuse my parents of forcing me into anything because in a way, because I was not that into anything, they had to push me a little bit. So they probably helped me. And, looking back, I guess whatever I learned even at the business school was very useful for what I did at Christie's. So it was a good combination. And I think I was quite proud, to be honest.
Do you mind if I ask how old you were at the time of getting your internship?
Well. I was probably late 20s, 28 maybe.
28.
I think so.
Was that a regular time for people to get internships, or was it usually earlier?
No, technically, I mean, to be honest, the idea of internship has changed. I mean, it's not necessarily automatic now. You do graduate and you go into, because company now, they like having interns because they see through their interns, who they're going to keep or who they're going to train and invest in. At the time, it was less organized. It was a lot of internships. It was sort of a job. And then if there's a bit of luck, you sort of stay or you move on or this. I would say doing an internship at my age there was late. Yeah.
Did you think it was an advantage at all?
Yeah, it was because I had my foot on the door. So also because I did Christie education, then doing an internship, that's how I got a job, because I was there. I was really making myself useful. I was doing everything. I remember I was pouring champagne for clients in a little event that the book department had done back then, with little money. So I was the intern. I was, doing everything. So I was pouring champagne. I was making myself useful. And one day, the sale coordinator or the sale administrator, I can't remember how we were called, back then, said, oh, I'm going on Friday. Do you want my job? I said, okay. And I had an interview with the head of the book department, which was very quick and very, probably against everything HR would do.
It was a chat and a coffee.
It was a chat and a coffee or a cup of tea, probably. And then I was in, and I started on the Monday, and I had no idea what I was doing. The girl had gone on the Friday, and so everything was very different then. Now internships are much more organized, structured, incredibly competitive. I've seen as a manager there myself, the quality of the people who get, come through, and the quantity of people who want to work there. It's insane. I wouldn't get through, I'm sure. Not a chance.
Well, we did actually read the qualifications needed for an internship, to get an internship at Christie's.
Oh.
And you have to be bilingual.
Yeah.
You've also got to have experience in the art sector, and you've also got to have client-facing experience. So it's basically a job at that point in time. What do you notice about the interns working there now? Do they seem different in character in any way to what you were like as an intern?
I think they're incredibly driven. I mean, the people I see, also because you've got so many applying, and so the very best, coming through. I'm impressed. I have to say they're very professional. They're very savvy in interviewing skills, very professional, very well educated. I mean, they come from the top universities. They speak all sorts of languages. No, I'm really impressed. It's a bit scary because, in a way, an internship is to start. And if you already have to have experience here and there, I mean, where do you start?
I also wanted to know about, you had a travel bug in your gap year as well. What is it about travel that you like so much?
I think it's a combination of not knowing what I was doing and being curious. So, when you don't know what to do, you take your rucksack and see what's there and see if there's an opportunity there.
When you were in your 20s, was there a place you knew you wanted to live?
Well, I came to London. Did I know I wanted to live in London? No, it was, you sort of, you come to live in a different country and you think I'm going to be here for 3 years. And then I'm, 28 years later, I'm still here. So I don't think it was a conscious decision that I would emigrate, if you want. But because I got a job in the city and I knew London from before, I loved London. London at the time, I mean, today's slightly different, but was really the place to be for all the continental people. It was the biggest city, the most international city in Europe, clearly. Everything seemed easy and exciting. So, yeah, I came to London. I guess it was some kind of a dream of mine. And being independent, distance myself maybe from my family, learn new things.
So there was this great feeling of excitement when you came to London. Were there any teething problems at all?
Well, I had a few friends and I was young, so it was pretty straightforward. But I mean, I had to, you learn things. I mean, I remember the sort of dating scene was a little bit new for me and a little bit awkward. I remember once, at the beginning of the 90s, there were those big companies buying old pubs, and turning them into gastropub. It was the thing then.
Oh, yeah.
So there was a lot of opening of gastropubs, And I remember once I was I met this guy, English guy, and we started talking, and I thought, oh, he's quite nice, but talking incredibly polite, like English can be. And I thought, okay, he's not interested in me the slightest, but that's fine, we're talking. And, we had a lovely conversation towards the end of the evening. I think he had a few drinks. And he turned to me and he said, oh, do you want to come back to my place? And I was like, sorry, what's happened in between? We're talking. Isn't it something called flirting that's missing?
Yeah.
And I thought, okay. I was a bit like, okay, that's weird. So I declined. But I remember I came back home thinking, I'm feeling quite lonely, thinking, I just don't really understand how we do those things there.
Like to apologise on behalf of the English boys. But
That's okay.
We're more like the in-betweeners rather than, James Bond.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no, I do. I'm an Anglophile, so I've forgiven them.
I'd be interested in knowing the cultural differences in case of, did you notice any cultural differences related to music, style, art? Did it feel, really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, England and France are close, but they are incredibly different. But I think the English are maybe a little bit more free in their art and the way they dress. I think the French are always used to be more, there's more a code and you have to be in a certain way. We talk about the English eccentricity. The French they think the English are eccentric. And I guess, even the punks, we didn't have that many in France. It was all coming from England, all the sort of new thing. Everything new, new age music, new wave. It was all English. Yeah, I think England was very creative.
So if you had to give one-word answers in this sort of situation, who had the best fashion, Britain or France?
So are you talking about 80s or when I was 22?
When you were 22.
I think the best fashion was, I would probably say French. I'd say in the 60s, maybe England. But difficult to compare. It's a tough question.
Best music, I'm guessing, is England's by far.
I wouldn't underestimate the French pop. Very, very good, but you just have to get into it.
I also quite like French rap as well.
It's well known apparently, and not that I know of.
What about, considering all the great artists, British or French art?
Well, again, I mean, if you take the whole history of art, I'd say between the Italians and the French, there's a good bunch of good things. But Dutch as well. I mean, it's so difficult. I mean, the English were maybe more creative in the 60s, definitely. But when I was 22 or in my 20s, maybe the English, I'd say. Yeah.
When did you first fall in love with art?
Well, art was, I have a few artistic people in my family, artistic talents like in music particularly, or painting, drawing. Not me, but it was, you know, we liked art, so you sort of open to it quite young. I remember I used to go to blockbuster exhibitions, the Grand Palais, or whatever, you know, all those things you go. And I always enjoyed it. I always liked being around art for as far as I remember, to be honest.
What is it about art that you find so appealing?
I think for me, it's sort of a little bit of an existential experience, art, because it's, especially I remember when I was in my 20s, you go and you see art, and it sort of feels that it translates the emotion you have inside you, but you can't really express, or you don't know what they are. So it's a little bit like when you meet somebody and you instantly feel that they understand you. Even something you don't understand about yourself, this person understands. So it's like coming across something, thinking, oh my God, you are expressing something I feel I have inside, but I don't know what it is. I don't know what to make of it. So it's incredibly moving. It's and especially because I was, as I said, immature and also in, you know, searching for meaning, a purpose. It sort of touched me inside. Basically, it's the I guess it's everything but superficial. It's really deep, and for me, it's important. Everything superficial scares me a little bit. And I'm saying it's existential because I think it gives a meaning to things that have no meaning, you know, especially when you're not sure where you're going. It gives a purpose to the very existence of human beings, to be honest. I mean, it's not, you know, it sounds very deep, but it's true. I mean, it's sometimes you say, what's the point? What's the point of life? And art can give you that answer. Just by being, just by relating to this emotion, it makes a point. It makes a good reason to stay alive. So it's really, really powerful to me.
Very comforting.
Very comforting, very intense, and necessary.
Was there an artist when you were in your 20s who you particularly connected with?
One that I always had a lot of sort of affection for was Frida Kahlo, the Mexican painter. I mean, I spent some time in Mexico, so there is this connection, but there's something so authentic about her. Everything that she produced is very, very linked to, you know, the trauma she had when she was young, the big accident, you know, she was literally literally cut in two by a horrible tram accident. And that stayed with her for all her life because, you know, she was incapacitated in some way or another. And she was also, you know, the wife of Diego Rivera, so, you know, who was very well known. And also the lover of Trotsky, which I thought was quite exciting as well. There's something incredibly real about this woman and incredibly powerful. That was, I mean, I suppose as a girl, I thought it was it meant a lot to me, and her paintings there's some kind of violence in there, but there's some kind of authenticity which is very powerful. I do tend to associate the personality of the artist and the art. When I really love an artist, it has to be together.
She was very young. She lived quite a short life, didn't she?
Yeah, because I think because of the accident, it was shortened because she had all sorts of problems.
Because we were talking about immaturity earlier and the idea of finding yourself. When you saw that, did you see Frida Kahlo as a woman who had found herself, who knew who she was?
I think so. I mean, I wish I'd known her, but I guess she explored everything she had in herself. So in that sense, she must have known well, what she was all about. I can't see how she could have produced those things without actually going deep down into herself, definitely. Yeah.
So, and talking about finding oneself, I've got 2 questions for you. The first one is, what do you think finding yourself actually means? And the second one is, when did you think you found yourself?
Oof. So, what does that mean to find myself? I think it means I think it's about understanding who you really are. It sounds sort of kind of obvious, but it's not that easy, because you've got the world around you live in, you've got the way you've been brought up, all those things that sort of make you. And they're not necessarily bad, good, or they could be, some of it might be good or bad or whatever, but they make you. But I think it's necessary to do a little bit of self-exploration to understand, with everything you've gathered through life, how it makes sense to who you really are. I feel sometimes I've taken decisions. So I suppose the broker is one, that it's the glamour of what was outside, and I thought I could identify with, that made me go and apply for those jobs. Whereas if I'd known myself better, I would have known that it's actually not something that would satisfy me. So I think it's about looking inside. It's about, and it's a work. I mean, it's about being on your own. It's about doing the work. It doesn't happen just like that, and it takes time. So to answer your second question, I've grown up and I've worked on myself a lot, but have I found myself 100%? Probably not. I guess it's a lifelong search. Yeah.
Commitment.
Yeah, and it's something you have to enjoy, because if you just enjoy the result, it's a process, I'd say. So and it moves, it's organic. It doesn't it's not like, oh, I don't know myself, I know myself. It's the whole thing. And this is what's interesting. It's the process and how you go through those things.
I must say, it's really nice to hear that, because especially as a young person, I think some of the advice we can get is, stop caring about what people think. And that is a very difficult thing to do, especially in a time where you're applying for jobs or you're looking for partners, where you have to care what people think. So it's nice hearing that. It's annoying hearing that it's a lot of work, but it's also comforting knowing that it's not something immediate.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be worried about a lot of work. It's a natural thing, technically, you do. I see what you mean, you say, oh, you don't care what people say. Well, yeah, you're applying for a job, you go for an interview, you feel naturally you want to please this person. But in my experiences, because I've been managing people for years and interviewing many, many people, it's a personal thing, but what I can see usually is the authenticity. When somebody is authentic, it shows. And for me, that's number one. And I don't care if they have any experience. I mean, it's part of a thing, but people who you can see they are true to themselves, they are not lying to themselves. A lot of people, and sometimes you interview people, they're very, very good, but you see, he doesn't want to be there. He wants to have the job, but it's not in his thing. And probably in 2 years he's going to leave.
What do you mean by thing there? Do you mean it's not a...
It's sometimes people want to have something not because it's for them, but because it's the thing they think is for them or the thing they think is the best. So to give you an example, I have actually a friend whose son is doing an internship in a big American bank. And he works 16 hours a day. I mean, it's hell. And you can see he is struggling a little bit as to, do I want to stay in this American bank because it's glamorous and I'm going to make a lot of money? But deep down, you can feel his heart is thinking, I can't do that. It's not me. I'm not this kind of person. But it's difficult to admit. So you see, so that's what I'm saying about being yourself and authentic. It's recognizing what you're good at and what makes you happy. It's not easy.
No, it's not.
But it's crucial.
When it comes to happiness, and you've got to look back at your whole 20s here, what do you think was the happiest year in that decade?
Probably my last year at the European Business School. So I finished and then I came to London for work. So I did internships there, but it was sort of more work experience. And it was a fabulous summer. I was sharing a house with friends in, where was it? In South London, in Tooting Bec. And I was, and I'm saying that because it was really sort of far south. And I was working in Uxbridge, somewhere in the north, taking the train, going out every night, making friends. You've got the energy. It's just great. It was just great fun. I had you feel totally free and happy. Yeah, I felt very happy then.
That sounds lovely. Now, before we start finishing off the podcast, there's a story that I really want to talk to you about. And that's, you were talking to Ari and I about your biggest regret. And I wondered if you could share that.
Well, so then it was actually during this year when I was so happy. I was in London, in Uxbridge, working for a company and gathering data and stuff. It sounds a bit unappealing, but it was actually great fun. And one of my brother, who was a journalist, called me and said, have you heard what's happening in Berlin? The wall's going down. Come, we're going. And I said, look, of course I'm coming, but it was, it was not that easy to get in a flight. There was no Eurostar, obviously, at the time. So, and they were keen to go, they had the car, they had to go. And they drove down from Paris to Berlin. So I missed it. And that made me quite sad. And I've always regretted it, to be part of that. Because for us, it was the end of the Cold War. It was a big, big moment. We were brought up, the good Americans, the bad Russians, and then the Bloc and the West and the East and stuff. And it was enormous and a great moment of excitement and joy. Sad to have missed it.
Do you think it's a particularly nostalgic moment, especially now, given everything that's happening?
Yes, I think so. And because it's, I suppose there's a before and after, definitely. Sometimes I talk to my children about that, but it doesn't mean much for them, It's far. But for me, it was really part of my upbringing, and it sort of, the world was opening. It was the end of some crazy kind of East-West separation. Not that it's completely finished now, but it felt it would be at the time.
Now, along with that quite, significant moment of history, we're now actually going to move on to a bit titled Silly Questions.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a change of pace.
Yeah. Okay.
We've sort of already answered it, but back when you were 22, what music were you listening to at that point? So
it was a lot of, obviously, rock and roll, the Americans were completely, especially the English, So I moved on a little bit from Dire Straits, Supertramp, and all those things that I when I was younger. So it was a lot of, for example, I remember Cranberries. I love this band.
They're so good.
Great. I really like them. And I remember I liked Kate Bush very much for some reason, but this was also before I was younger with Kate Bush. And it was the beginning of, early 90s was the beginning of the sort of club music. I loved that. The rave, we started to go to raves and stuff. That was great fun.
Ari is going to be so embarrassed as I mention it. She's nodding right now, but she's embarrassed. But when you said Kate Bush, she just did a fist pump in the air.
Well, I know. My son, I think it was my son or my daughter, because I understand Kate Bush was, one of her songs was part of a recent...
Stranger Things.
Yeah, which I haven't seen. But sometimes my children, say, "Oh, Mum, do you know Kate Bush?" And I'm like, really? So they seem to be oblivious about the fact that I've been young once. Anyway, so it's kind of funny. But I think Kate Bush herself, I saw an article, she was like, "What's going on?" Good for her. It seems the 80s music is it's quite fashionable, to be honest. Yeah. Oh. But I loved pop music. Serge Gainsbourg, for example, for me is an absolute must. I don't know if you know.
Is he the one married to Jane Birkin?
Jane Birkin, yeah. No, fabulous songwriter.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because a lot of people know the sort of shocking stuff, and the fact that he was trying to be provocative, but he's an incredibly talented songwriter. So there is a tradition of, French chanson française, which I really, really love.
What was the drink of choice when you were 22?
I'd say I would drink red wine with food and gin and tonic when going out.
And top 5 clothes you would have found in your wardrobe at 22?
So, yes, I thought about that. I definitely had... I think they're coming back now. The Levi's jeans 501. You had to have a 501. Yes. I think it was more suited for men than girls, but boys than girls. But anyway, and Santiago I had a motorbike as well. So I had a Perfecto, Perfecto leather jacket. We called it a Perfecto. I don't know why. Sort of the leather jacket goes sort of like it goes like that.
Before we continue, I just wanted to talk. You had a motorbike.
Yeah, I had a motorbike. Yeah. Well, to be very honest, I started to do my motorbike driving license test in France, and I finished it in England. So I bought it when I was in London. Wow. That was cool. Yeah, it was not a big one.
Do you still ride?
No, I sold it, and I do regret it, I have to say. But I was thinking about it the other day, but I don't think I'll buy another one.
The last question we have is, we've sort of explained this to you. We want a life hack from you. We don't want any serious advice, but we want something you did in your 20s or later, which is just a little silly thing that you found personally helpful, like putting socks in your shoes when traveling. Did you manage to think of one? I found this very difficult to say. I couldn't really find of anything. The only thing I found, but I don't think it's a life hack as such, but it's something that I've always had
And I still do now a little, what do you call it? A little notebook, sort of mini notebooks. And even when, bizarrely, I love those ones you open vertically, like the detectives, like Columbo, Detective Columbo.
Yeah.
You've got it in your back pocket, and I loved Columbo was a complete. I liked the idea, he would sort of open it and say, on Tuesday you said you came back at 4:30, and you had these notes and just slapping like that. And I had this thing about it, and so I had those little notes, and I would write, an idea or a quote or title of a book somebody says, even, sort of to do things and have it. And I always like having that. But I don't know if it's a life hack or whatever, but this is something I did.
I think it's actually quite interesting. I like how sort of this organizational method you had was inspired by Detective Columbo as well.
Yeah, I don't know, because I liked him a lot, and I don't know, it was a little fantasy of me that I flapped the things. Here we are. Maybe I should have been a detective. I don't know.
Maybe, but it seems you've had there's still time. Armelle, thank you. It's been a really interesting discussion, and it was great to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me.